Good morning, good afternoon, and a very good evening to you, wherever you may be. My name is Wajahat. I'm the Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington. However, I am here in New York City with the chairman of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Pakistan's former Prime Minister, the one and only Imran Khan. Good evening, Khan Saab. How are you doing?
As good as in the circumstances, living in interesting times.
Well, speaking of the times, is your famous exercise regime still in play, considering your bullet injuries and considering your schedule these days with your 150 something court cases?
I still haven't fully recovered from my bullet wound because it damaged my nerve in my right foot. So therefore, exercise is very limited. And then I have, almost 160 cases now. So my time is really spent from one courtroom to the other. And plus, I mean, a lot of them are terrorism cases. I mean, I'm supposed to have committed terrorism. So about 40 odd cases are related to terrorism.
Well, let's start with that. Let's start with the big picture and go to the let's time travel back to April 2021 when all of this started, and begin with the so-called American connection with your ouster. A lot of people are interested, at least in this neck of the woods, about whether it was short-sighted of you to blame the US, target the Americans after your ouster, considering how you and your party are now hoping for their support. The State Department has just recently called you a private citizen and said that it's not going to comment on your status. I see you smiling, interestingly, but do you think it was short-sighted to really tick off the Americans, considering where you stand now regarding their support?
Well, let's just break it up. First of all, the facts. What happened? I get a cipher. Cipher is this coded message from my ambassador in Washington. He sends me this coded message. And now you tell me, how should have I responded? I mean, anyone, if they had got a message like that, prime minister of a country gets a message, an official meeting taking place between the undersecretary of state, US, and the Pakistan ambassador in Washington. And the message reads, here's the prime minister reading the message, that unless the prime minister, Imran Khan, is removed in a vote of no confidence, there'll be consequences for Pakistan. There were other things in the cipher, but I mean, imagine a prime minister of a country, elected prime minister of a country, reads this message that an American official is telling my ambassador that Pakistan should get rid of me. Otherwise, there'll be consequences. So I took this to the cabinet because I thought this was deeply insulting. For a country of 250 million people, I thought it was humiliating for anyone to write, any official from any country writing a letter like that, or sending a message like that to the prime minister, elected prime minister. Then I put it in front of the National Security Council. The National Security Council, which is headed by all the service chiefs, including the army chief. This National Security Council then gives a démarche to the US, protest that this is meddling in the internal affairs of Pakistan. But what happened was that after the cipher, the next day the vote of confidence is tabled in the National Assembly. And within weeks, my government goes. So I basically narrated the fact this is not anti-Americanism. This is a fact. After my government goes, the government of Shahbaz Sharif, who was part of this conspiracy, they then hold a National Security Council meeting. They call the ambassador from the US, Asad Majid, and they ask him, were the contents in the cipher true? Does he stand by them? And he stood by them. He said, this is exactly what happened. So I was basically narrating a fact. Now, as subsequently things unfolded, it turns out that our ex-army chief, who was then the army chief, General Bajwa, he was actually campaigning through his lobbyist, Hussain Haqqani, who was paid $30,000 by my government, he was lobbying with the US to say that Imran Khan was anti-American. He tweeted, General Bajwa was pro-American, I was anti-American. So therefore, what transpired later on was that actually my own army chief was campaigning against me, that I was anti-American. And I think he was feeding them, because that's how this cipher must have gone, because I had perfectly good relationship with the Trump administration.
So, premised on that, I understand it's a long arc, it's a long narrative, but they say that your positions have been inconsistent. There was first, of course, the letter, then there wasn't a letter, then there was the cipher, which was then admonished by the ambassador himself, Asad Majid Khan. Then there was the Donald Lu connection, the threat by Donald Lu, so to say. Then there was, of course, you premising all of this after the vote confidence, saying this is because I said absolutely not to their drone bases. Then, of course, in all of this is compounded by you politicking, telling millions of Pakistanis almost on a nightly basis that there's a clear American conspiracy for regime change. Then comes the Haqqani connection, where you said that he's taken money and he's convinced all of Washington against me. Then you finally put it down in the court of Bajwa, General Bajwa, the former army chief. The question is then, I understand there was a lot happening. It was over months. But today, the positioning is quite simple. You said it's less the Americans, it's more Bajwa. That was not where you were a year ago, 14 months ago. And that has hurt your credibility, at least in this neck of the woods in Washington. So would you have done it differently?
Well, look, Wajahat, look, I use the word unfolded as things unfolded. At the time, this is first week of March, I received this cipher. And so I didn't immediately talk about the cipher because there was an OIC conference in Pakistan. And I didn't want this thing to break before the OIC conference, which was about 22nd or 3rd of March. And so therefore, after that, on the 28th of March, I first disclosed this. And at that time, I was convinced that, I mean, who would not be convinced reading that cipher? Who would not be convinced that the Americans are demanding that they get rid of the prime minister? I mean, what inference should I get from that? Clearly, it was clear. So therefore, I did blame them that they were responsible. I never used the word basis. I never used what reasons. All I gave the facts that here is the cipher. This is what happened. The moment the cipher came, the vote of no confidence is tabled. And then those members of our backbenchers in our party, who we had knowledge that they were visiting the American embassy for the past 2 months before, and they were the first ones to jump ship. So what am I supposed to gather from that? So therefore, that's exactly what I said. Now, subsequently, how did we find out? Because I think FARA, which is in the United States, you have to register, all lobbyists have to register there.
Yep.
In FARA, then this thing came out that Hussain Haqqani was on my government's payroll, but then not hired by us, hired by Bajwa. And then there was a Haqqani tweet, which came in the end of March, which said that General Bajwa is pro-American, and Imran Khan is anti-American. So then you put 2 and 2 together exactly what had happened, because General Bajwa wanted an extension. So that extension, he wanted, he later on toured the United States too. So these things subsequently came out. Therefore, whatever I said was at the time exactly what I believed. And in the end, what was the conclusion? My conclusion was that General Bajwa had lobbied. He was lobbying for himself. He had deliberately campaigned against me to make me the bad guy, because the conspiracy was then his. And as it unfolded.
I'm with you about the unfolding bit, and especially that it went over months, and that you adjusted your positions accordingly, Khan Saab. But again, in retrospect, was it short-sighted to have so much vitriol, so much venom, so much rhetoric on a daily basis, convincing millions of Pakistanis, angering them about the so-called American connection, and thus alienating Washington, alienating the Biden administration, which today calls you a private citizen and won't back you up, even though clearly you need that backing.
Listen, Wajahat, I don't want any backing from anyone. Look, if the people of Pakistan decide that they want to elect me as the prime minister, fine. If they don't, I don't care. I mean, I've seen everything. I've been to the top. I mean, I have more love and respect in this country than anyone else. Why would all the 12 parties together, including the military establishment, with one aim, somehow the whole policy is how to get rid of one man? You know, the whole country's democracy is being dismantled just to get rid of one man. So I have more love and respect in this country. I don't care whether I become the prime minister or not. But the truth is that this is exactly what happened. How humiliating is it for a country? How come the US thinks of me as anti-American? Why don't they ask the question that how could their official make such an arrogant statement that a country should, an ambassador should give a message to get rid of the elected prime minister? And you didn't think that there should be any response because the US would be annoyed with me? I mean, I should shut up and allow this thing to happen? Well, you know, if they are angry at me, so be it. I mean, all I want the US, I don't want any backing for myself. They professed values. The Western values are democracy, human rights, rule of law. Whenever they have to whip up China in Hong Kong or in Uyghurs or the Russians, they use these things. All I want them to do is to say all these things are being violated in Pakistan: human rights, custodial torture going on, democracy being dismantled. They should talk about that. I don't care if they say nothing about me. I'm quite happy being a private citizen.
All right. Well, when you were not a private citizen, when you were Pakistan's prime minister, you were praised. Let's go back to even further. Forget last year. Let's go back to your career. Let's pivot to India. So 2019, February, there was, as you remember, there was a military escalation with India. Pakistan Air Force jets shot down Indian aircraft. You were praised globally in those tense 24, 48 hours for the stance you took against war. You de-escalated what could have been a potential nuclear face-off between these two rivals. You were, again, I'm going to say it on the record because it needs to be said, you were quite responsible in your statements and praised globally, even in India. However, eventually, the criticism is that you missed an opportunity to establish long-term peace with India. General Bajwa, I know you're not a fan, but General Bajwa came with a peace plan, which was constructed very delicately over years. There was a ceasefire, there were trade talks, there was a potential visit in the offing, and you rejected the trade talks. Even though as Commerce Minister, which you wore that hat, you first approved the trade ties, but then as Prime Minister, you rejected them. It was quite awkward to see the same man, Imran Khan, the Commerce Minister, saying yes, peace with India, normalization with India, saying no, as Prime Minister, no peace with India, no normalization with India. What caused that? What caused that irregularity? Was there ISI interference? Did you get a second reckoning? Why did you change your mind?
Look, I do not believe in settling issues through military action. I am against. I have always been anti-military settling issues through war or through using arms. So and this is not now. It's been my view for 3 decades. Now, what happened was that when that happened, when the Pulwama happened and we returned the pilot, I mean, it was clear that it is unthinkable for 2 nuclear-armed countries to even think of escalation. I mean, I am worried about what's happening in Ukraine right now, and I worry that this could go out of hand. So, as someone who is against nuclear arms and the the idea of the world committing suicide through a nuclear war. So what happened was that on 5th February 2019, India took away the statehood of Kashmir unilaterally. Now, we all know that there's a United Nations Security Council, not one, two resolutions on Kashmir, that Kashmir was a disputed territory between Pakistan and India. And through a plebiscite, it was to be decided, the people of Kashmir were supposed to decide. Now, that was the status. Suddenly, on 5th August 2019, India unilaterally got rid of that treaty and the UN resolutions and took away the statehood. So what were we supposed to do? 100,000 Kashmiris have been martyred in this in their quest for independence. And so what was Pakistan supposed to do? Accept the fait accompli, or actually stand with the people of Kashmir who had given such sacrifices? So that's what we decided. And the reason why our relationship, and by the way, I tried my best before then to improve our relationship with India. In fact, my first statement was, you come one step towards us, we'll come two towards you. I mean, I tried everything, but I came across this brick wall, and I realized it's something to do with the RSS BJP mentality, where they just want, they've cashed in on hostility with Pakistan. That's all. But frankly, it was never a question of being misled by anyone. And Bajwa, I don't know what he's talking about, because the idea which he was floating to me was that first India would give some concession, then we would invite them to Pakistan. The concession was that they would gradually steps, they would undo what they had done on 5th August. But that never happened. So it never moved forward. I don't know what he's talking about.
So,
because Bajwa keeps shifting his positions.
So what about the bit which your office did? Forget Bajwa. You accepted during all of this, during this potential breakthrough, when there was a ceasefire in place, when there was a visit by Prime Minister Modi in the offing, where you would have hosted him. I mean, if I may, Khan Saab, this is a Nobel Prize being presented to you. And here you are as Commerce Minister. You accept trade talks, and then a few days later, you reject your own trade talks. I'm trying to get to the bottom of, was it forces within the military? Was it the ISI? What did you get intelligence briefings from someone? What caused you to change your mind when you were almost there, along with your chief, in trying to repair ties, even convincing India to back off from Article 370?
Look, I don't remember the trade talks. All I know is that there was this supposed to be a quid pro quo. India was supposed to give some concession, give some sort of a roadmap to Kashmir. And I was going to then host Narendra Modi in Pakistan. But it never materialized. So it never went further than that. So that's how it was.
Speaking of that era as well, it was around the same time, now recent reports have emerged, that General Bajwa went public. At that time, he said it privately, he said it to a bunch of journalists, that Pakistan has lost military parity with India. Pakistan's tanks are rusted. Pakistan doesn't have the fuel to provide its forces to fight a war. And that's why peace with India is inevitable, because Pakistan can't keep up. You've seen this in recent news items. Did that intelligence, did that briefing from your Chief of Army Staff ever come to your office? Did he ever consult you or confront you with this data?
Look, even if that was the case, for an army chief to make these statements is so ridiculous. What army chief makes these foolish statements? Even if it is the case. So, number one, yes, General Bajwa would make these statements, but I mean, for an army chief, he's basically saying that, he's basically saying we are just too weak. You never make such a statement. But more to the point, who wants war with India? I mean, why would we want war with India? Why would anyone want to see a confrontation between the two countries? The thing is, like two civilized countries, we should solve our issues through dialogue. And if we can't solve them through dialogue, we just keep talking. But war is never an option. So, firstly, war is not an option.